It is March 1st, 2026, and Iran has begun a period of mourning in the aftermath of the murder by the US and Israel of Iranian leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But while Trump seemed to think that a series of decapitation strikes would ruin the Iranian government and that it would topple like a house of cards, the opposite has been true. The Iranian government is standing strong. They will choose and vote for a new leader in the coming days. Oh, and the Iranian military is still responding on its end, doing exactly what it said it would do, retaliating against both Israel and US military bases in the region. So, where does that leave us when it comes to the overall state of this war? Well, we got into all of the latest and more with a special guest earlier. So, let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Syed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at the University of Tehran. Professor Marandi, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you very much for having me, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you today. I know that you have been doing interviews nonstop, really trying to get the word out at a time that is incredibly painful for the Iranian people. You have a nation in mourning today after the US and Israel carried out a series of terror attacks that killed not only Iranian children that were at school and Iranian civilians, but also Iranian leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Will you start by taking us through what it's been there on the ground as people, while yes, they are taking to the streets, it's because they are overwhelmed with grief and anger towards the perpetrators of these crimes.
People are obviously very upset, and Ayatollah Khamenei has a lot of support in Iran. We saw two very large sets of demonstrations in support of the Constitution and the leader just over the past few weeks. One series of demonstrations was on January the 12th in response to the riots. And up to 3 million people went to the streets in Tehran, and of course, huge numbers across the country. Then the West, people in the West, and I think Musk and Elon Musk and X were trying to portray it as AI. And so what we had was on February the 11th, the 47th anniversary of the revolution, we saw an even larger turnout. And some say the number in Tehran was up to 4 million. And there were more journalists, and I think some of our mutual friends or acquaintances were in Iran at that time, and they documented the crowd. So he's always had a great deal of credibility in Iran. It's not universal, obviously, and there are people who oppose him, who oppose the Islamic Republic, but his support is very substantial. And so the fact that he was murdered in this way, and the United States again lied about at the negotiating table, and was just deceiving the Iranian people, and was conspiring to murder and to wage an illegal war, that has outraged Iranians. And I think it's going to have a very long-term effect, because I think from now on, no one is going to be interested in having any sort of real relationship with the United States in future, because the United States doesn't accept laws, it doesn't accept commitments, it just murders, it strangles Cubans, it murders fishermen and kidnaps presidents. And so I think the mood towards the United States has permanently shifted, at least as for the in years, the next few years. But ironically, what has happened is that by waging this illegal and murderous war, where they killed in one elementary school for girls, they killed almost 150 kids, and they slaughtered them. Or in the gym, they murdered almost 20 girls who were playing volleyball. But it has increased the resolve of ordinary Iranians, those who support the Islamic Republic, who are the overwhelming majority. You will find people who are hostile to, as I said, the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khamenei, who are very happy that he's been martyred. But that's not the mood of the country at all. In fact, overwhelmingly, people are deeply offended by those who behave in this way. So, but the resolve has increased, and I think that that's a mistake. They've increased the resolve of the population to resist, and that is going to have an impact on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. And not only has it had an impact inside Iran, but it's had an impact across the region. We've seen people come to the streets in other countries, in Yemen, in Iraq, and Lebanon, and they're outraged, and they are part of the axis of resistance. So when the time comes for them to engage in conflict with the United States, it's going to make it all the more painful. So they thought that by murdering him, they could get a quick win, but that comes from a fundamental lack of understanding of Iran. That's what they've been saying for 47 years, that Iran's a house of cards. And they've always failed. The last war, they murdered so many of these commanders, nothing happened. This time around, they murdered the leader, nothing will happen. You will have a new leader elected, they'll continue the war. And I think that the Iranians, I'm very confident that the Iranians are going to impose a strategic defeat on the Trump regime and Netanyahu. It will come at a major cost. I mean, people will die. It's very sad. I mean, today there was heavy bombing here in Tehran, but and they bombed the Red Crescent, the central building for the Red Crescent. They bombed the hospital. It's extraordinary what these people do.
It really is. And I know that we watched them carry out a genocide, which is still ongoing against the Palestinians. And so many people may look at that and think, oh, well, it's just Gaza. No, they are expanding it. Now they're targeting Iran, exactly as you said. They go for the hospitals, they go for the schools. And it really did seem like, based on the statements that we heard from Trump and then from Netanyahu, they thought that we'll carry out a few decapitation strikes, get some of the top commanders, get the Ayatollah. Oh, and then Iran will fall. And I noticed in Trump's statements, especially in that 8-minute video that he released after the bombing started, he specifically said to the Iranian people, now is your time, take to the streets, this is your chance. And so, exactly as you said, there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding, this magical fantasy of Iranians taking to the streets, overthrowing their government just because the US carried out these strikes, when Iranians are watching their neighborhoods being destroyed and their family members and neighbors killed, the last thing that they're going to want is some, CIA-backed government taking over. Are you surprised that Trump and Netanyahu have taken things to this point and that they still do not understand Iran whatsoever?
No, not at all, because that is the general problem in the West. If you look at Western media, whether it's liberal or conservative, they're all controlled by the oligarchy, the Epstein class. They are hostile, And when you look at the State of the Union address, the only place where both sides all stood up and clapped was in aggression against Iran, murdering Iranians. And so they believe their own propaganda. They give money to many thousands of Iranians, perhaps tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of Iranians are more or less on the payroll. I mean, you have in Albania 3,000 or 4,000 Iranians. I don't know the number exactly. Sometimes they say 3, sometimes 4. It's somewhere, something like that, who are just trolls. And they're members of the MEK terror organization who killed many thousands of Iranians at the behest of Saddam Hussein. They were traitors to the country. And you have many others like them, troll farms elsewhere, and terrorist organizations, and political parties, and media. There are hundreds of Persian language media outlets in the West, more outside Iran than there are inside Iran. And they're all hostile. So they fund these people, and these people give them the narrative that they want to hear. And they fund these people, and sometimes these people they almost always fund the politicians with the money that they receive. And there's this circle. And So they believe their own propaganda. When their head hits reality, when they hit a brick wall, it doesn't change anything. The 8-Day War was when the 12-Day War was when Iran was supposed to collapse. It was supposed to be this house of cards that fell. It didn't. So now again, and remember back then, Trump also said he tweeted or he posted in Truth Social, I think, uh, unconditional surrender.
Mhm.
Or I'll, well, what happened? Ultimately, it was Netanyahu who was seeking a ceasefire and during the last 3, 4 days was begging Trump to get him a ceasefire. That's what Steve Bannon said at least twice. So again, they're doing the same thing. And I think the reason is quite clear. It's this Orientalist mindset, this narrative that's been going on for so many years that's also embedded, that's also linked to Orientalism. It's racist also, but it's like that if they're not like us, they're not normal, they're not stable, they're not sophisticated. But the reality is that they murdered the head of state or the leader, and which is a huge, an extraordinary violation of international law. These things just never happened before. Now they're just normal, and the U.S. has normalized this, and it will come back to haunt the U.S. But the point that I was trying to make is that they murdered the leader, and nothing happened. Why? Because we have a constitution. Because our constitution has solutions. So on the one hand, they united the Iranian people further. They enhanced their resolve. They increased their outrage and the outrage of Iran's friends in the region and beyond. And then the Constitution does its work. There's a 3-member council right now that runs the country: the president, the head of the judiciary, and a representative from the Guardian Council. And then as soon as the new leader is elected by the Council of Experts, this council will go aside and the leader will take charge and have the responsibilities that Ayatollah Khamenei had. That's how it works. So, but the United States seems to think that, no, this is just, all we do is just kill, murder a few people, and it's, well, yes, it didn't work last time. It's not going to work now. It has maximum pressure sanctions hasn't worked. Starving kids hasn't worked. Making families suffer hasn't worked. But I think until the Epstein regime in the United States, until they are faced with a real crisis, and I think that's coming, an economic, social, political crisis in the United States. Until then, I think this mentality is not going to really change. But I think we're getting there. I think the problems that the United States has is accumulating. This war is going to increase those problems significantly, especially if it escalates, because if the price of oil goes up very much, then you will have an economic crash, especially since the economy right now is pretty much near a cliff. So under those circumstances, maybe there'll be significant change in the United States and mentality. That's what happened to Russia. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia changed significantly in the way in which it behaved towards its neighbors. Very different than during the Soviet Union. So we'll have to see. But right now, what the Americans have done is that they've strengthened Iranian unity. But they will, of course, if tonight 100 people or 1,000 people go to the streets and celebrate Ayatollah Khamenei's martyrdom, they'll focus on this and say the Iranian people are, but that's just self-deception. The reality is that overwhelmingly Iranians are mourning this. They're unhappy about this. But again, it doesn't fit the narrative. So they'll just say, no, that's fake, or they'll just say these people are forced to the streets. All that's the nonsense that they always say. But the reality that they fail to confront is that, well, if what people like me are saying is just propaganda and I'm a mouthpiece, then why is it that everything I say has turned out right? And if you're the one who's so objective, why is it that everything that you've said over these years has none of it has materialized. And you know, I did a program on Friday on Al Mayadeen, and it was about the never-ending Iran is about to collapse narrative in the West. And it was interesting because when I did some research, the things that they're saying now, they were saying in the 1980s and 90s. The youth are disillusioned, people are tired of the revolution, the regime is splitting, and you could take those headlines from the late 1980s and the 1990s and the beginning of this century, put them in as headlines today, and you wouldn't notice the difference.
Wow, that is crazy to think about. And I know Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, a week ago, he comes out and he says, Iran is days away from making a nuclear weapon. And I'm going, I heard that before, and we've been hearing it for decades. And it has been notable too. These warnings from Iran have also been there, right? Every single time Iran retaliates, they warn once again. And the US has become complacent, thinking, oh, well, they're not really going to do that. But as we've seen over the last couple of days, Iran has carried out unprecedented attacks against more than a dozen U.S. military bases in the region, and the IRGC released a statement declaring that the most devastating offensive operation in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran's armed forces will begin towards the occupied territories and American terrorist bases. Now, we also had the IRGC coming out and announcing that they had fired 4 ballistic missiles targeting the USS Abraham Lincoln. So, what does that tell us about where Iran is coming from, but also what they are willing to do, as no one has listened to their warnings? They continue to be attacked, and now they just lost their leader who was there for a number of decades. And exactly as you said, the government is staying intact, but so is the military, and now they're responding.
Well, again, that goes back to this whole fake narrative that they've constructed, that Iran is a house of cards, that the regime, whenever you see people say regime, I become suspect. Not everyone, but because it's a derogatory term. They never say the Saudi regime. They never say the Korean regime. They never say the Jordanian regime. They say the Iranian regime, the Venezuelan regime, the Cuban regime. And that is derogatory to make people see it as illegitimate and unstable. And, so they have constructed this worldview, and based upon that, they move forward. But the facts on the ground don't match that. Especially, as you pointed out, at a time of war, you see that Iran is effectively fighting not just the Israeli regime now, but the Americans, which are much more powerful than the Israelis. Of course, the Israelis, they have no power. Whatever they have, they get from the West. But with Western support, they launch those attacks, and then now you have an American force that's more important than the Israeli regime. Yet they don't have the upper hand against Iran. Yes, they murder Iranians, they destroy infrastructure, they destroy lives, they maim kids, they murder kids, and that sort of thing, and little girls name their faces for life. Yes, sure, they do that a lot, but they're not going to win. And yet they will continue to think, well, this time we didn't get it right, next time. Or whenever there's this, sign of discontent somewhere, they'll see this as representative of the whole of society. Why? Because that's what they want to believe. And so they're going to, continue pursuing these foolish policies, and this is going to hurt them even more, and it's going to hurt their allies or their proxies in the region. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris who host US bases, who are complicit in these attacks against Iran, they're paying the price now. And it's their own fault, because they've been helping the Americans carry out war. These are US interests, because these regimes are all, Qatar is a US proxy. So when Qatar is hurt, that means the United States is weakened, because these proxies benefit the United States. They're not a weight. Not only do they sell oil and gas, but they purchase a lot of US weapons. Well, if the economies collapse as they are right now because of what's going on, well, then that not only does the price of oil go up, but also US exports in the long run go down. But the United States is not pursuing its own interests. The people in charge are Israel firsters. They're the the Epstein class. It's the oligarchs. It's the people bound to the Zionist narrative. So they're more than willing to sacrifice the interests of the American people. Otherwise, when Trump came to power, as you know better than I, he was going to end all the wars. He was going to release the Epstein documents. He was, uh, he was going to do all the things that he's now doing the exact opposite. Now you can shoot young blonde women in the face and get away with it, or a nurse who's taking care of former soldiers and veterans, if he's carrying a weapon in accordance with the law, MAGA people say no, he deserves death. So these people, they've moved against everything that they were saying before. And in the case of Iran, it's the same too. Trump, as you alluded to, Witkoff said last week the same thing that we heard in 2003, the same lies. The Iranian nuclear program was obliterated. We heard that 100 times, and now Witkoff says they're a week away from a nuclear weapon. Or Vance says there are signs that they're building a nuclear weapon. Or Trump goes and says they're building a missile to strike the United States. It's the same as 2003. Trump is no different than Bush. But when you go and look at the Trump-Bush debate, he was attacking Jeb Bush for the same things that he's doing. He was attacking his father and thus the son. But he's doing the exact things that he was attacking back then.
Yeah, it's very telling when I know even Trump's own statements, right? People have brought up videos and past posts on Twitter of him saying that Obama at the time that he would start a war with Iran because he wasn't able to negotiate or that he right, exactly, as a way to distract from everything going on. And yet, all of a sudden, we have Operation Epic Theory, just happens to coincide with the Epstein files, that the Trump administration is now pursuing. The last thing I want to ask you, looking at the days and weeks to come, I know that Israel is continuing its bombing, it's continuing to target Iran. Trump has said a lot on social media, he's talked very big. We know that he tends to do that. What are you keeping an eye on when it comes to kind of where this war goes from here and the chances of any possible de-escalation when Trump does realize that he's in over his head?
Well, the price tag, which includes the price of energy, it includes the decline of the economies in the Persian Gulf region that are bound to the United States, and Trump and Witkoff have a lot of interest in the Persian Gulf. They have billions of dollars of interest here. They've been making a lot of money over the last year, and those interests are being targeted, by the way. So when it hits his pocket, when it starts affecting the American consumers, I think that is when the pressure will build. I mean, MAGA has turned into a cult, and there's, I would guess, like 20 to 30% of Americans that no matter what Trump does, ultimately will stick with him. But if they start losing their jobs, if the price of energy goes through the roof, I think that they'll probably dump him much faster than we may think. So the costs, the shortage of equipment and ammunition and the logistical costs, because they have to bring everything all the way from the other side of the world. They'll be running out of missiles, and then these planes, because of Iran's defenses, they're stationed very far away from Iran, so they have to fly, refuel, bomb, return, refuel, land, and that makes it much more costly. Fewer airstrikes, and the planes they become worn out and they need overhauls, which are expensive. So I think that as time passes, if Iran continues to perform well, and I have no reason to think that it won't on the battlefield, it will be painful. People will die, kids will die, but it's U.S. aggression. It's Trump aggression. It's Netanyahu aggression. They have no, for Iran, it is a war of survival. For the Americans, it's a war of choice. It's to help the Zionists, is to do the bidding of the Epstein class. So Iran will continue to fight. And of course, as I said earlier, Iran's allies across the region are mobilizing and preparing. And the United States does not have ground forces in the region to deal with that. So I have no doubt that Trump will fail. The longer the war lasts, the greater the cost will be, and the more long-term damage it will be for the world, for everyone, but in particular for Trump. So we'll have to see how things play out, whether the US is stupid and escalates out of frustration, because that Trump could easily do that. He's not normal at all, erratic. So it's difficult to predict 1 hour from now, let alone a day or two from now, let alone a week from now. But I think that ultimately the cost for the American people at multiple levels will make this unsustainable.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And Trump got into this thinking it was going to be some sort of easy victory. And I think he's in for learning a very hard lesson here. And the American people who are supporting him are right there with him. I know that there is certainly a lot at stake all around here. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest. Syed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at the University of Tehran, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and an honor.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.